Mr. Chairman, our next witness is witness 227.
Where's the witness in the bundle, please?
It's in the supplemental bundle, page 504, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Witness, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Vale.
Yes, I do hear you.
Thank you for agreeing to testify. Could you repeat after me, please? I solemnly declare that I will speak the truth.
I solemnly declare to tell the truth,
The whole truth and nothing but the truth.
the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
There'll be some questions from counsel now, followed by questions from the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The witness, a male demonstrator, was arrested during peaceful demonstrations on 17th November. He was tortured, badly beaten, harassed, and intimidated. He was tried by a revolutionary court and condemned to 20 months imprisonment. One of his inmates was executed. Witness 227, can you please tell the tribunal of what you witnessed on Sunday, 17th November, and how and why you were arrested?
Yes. It was Sunday, and what happened for us was that a friend of mine let me know that in the city of Rasht and in one of the squares of the city, there had been protests, and as far as I could see, it was all peaceful. That's to say, when we went to the street, we did not see anything but slogans by the people and the peaceful protests. There was no violence. We saw nothing else. A few hours passed, and it came to a point that plainclothes forces, including the paramilitary militia and also the Revolutionary Guards, they caused it to become violent. They started breaking windows of the shops, setting fire to buildings, and they wanted to create an agitated crowd in order to be able to have a pretext to arrest them. Because if the protests are peaceful, then they do not have any kind of pretext to beat people up or to arrest them. And they forced people to become violent, and then a wave of arrests and tortures started because they started beating people up on the streets, and then they took them, of course, to detention centers, etc. What happened for me was that in the afternoon of the same day, the 17th of November, we went to this square that I have talked about, and I will be very general now. And when we reached this square, we witnessed a series of slogans by people, and gradually things became violent. Things went forward, and they used pepper spray, truncheons, and also we heard shooting in the air. We were hearing shootings, and they said it was in the air. And as things went on, and we were moving, they were trying to take individuals out of the crowd. For example, there were those who would say that this person who is dressed in black should be taken one by one. Individuals, they were taken, they were beaten on the side, pepper spray in their ears, and I would like to emphasize the fact that generally speaking, these protests were peaceful. It were the security forces who wanted to impel people to become violent in order to arrest them. Unfortunately, I was arrested very quickly and very early on during the first 1 or 2 hours that I was on the street. And what happened to me was that they picked me out, and that's what they did with some other people also. They would pick you out, they would push you into a corner, they would push you in a vehicle, and they would take you away. And as soon as they would arrest you, they would beat you up until you would reach the detention center, and you would reach the security institutions. And the shocker, the worst thing was that the shocker hit an old man, and he died right there. And it was the most important thing that I saw on the street. You can also review the statistics yourselves. You will see that the killed people during those protests were in the south of Iran and in the center of Iran. And personally, I did not anybody who was killed, and it's perhaps because I was arrested early on, but I did hear that a number of people were killed. I am, of course, at your disposal here. If you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Explain to the tribunal that once you were arrested, what were the conditions of the detention center?
اگه میشه دوباره تکرار کنید قطع و وصل شد صدا.
Please explain to the tribunal the conditions of the detention center. That
شرایط ما رو حدوداً
Yes. The intelligence services of the military arrested us. We didn't know it then. Afterwards, we knew about it. They were in plain clothes. We were arrested. I was arrested by them, and it was almost 10 o'clock at night when I was arrested, and a number of others, and the information services that arrested us took us directly, and they blindfolded us, they put the handcuffs on us, and from then immediately they started beating us up for no reason at all. They kicked you in your head, in your side, and they had no fear of beating you up. They would kick you anywhere they could. And during that night, perhaps they changed our place 3 times. They took us from the information services to the Ministry of Intelligence. Then from the Ministry of Intelligence, they took us to the police station of the province. Now, of course, this process and the stages were very difficult. First, we were taken to one place. We waited in the information services until midnight. Then we were taken to the intelligence, Ministry of Intelligence. We were 400-500 people there. It was winter, and one of the things that they would do very conveniently was to strip everybody naked, everybody, and they would keep you in the cold. And this was something, the stripping you naked was something that they did very often. As soon as anybody was arrested, that's what they would do. They would strip you naked. and they would keep you in the cold for a number of hours. And then it was almost 4 o'clock in the morning that we were delivered to the police. Then again, they stripped us naked. They kept us in the yard, and it was morning when they took us into the detention center. They had not given us any water, any food, nothing. And whatever place they took us to, and when they displaced us, whether it was the information services, the intelligence ministry, or the police station, they would just keep on beating us up, no matter with what equipment. It was as if it was a recreation for them. They were amusing themselves. They were having fun. The next day, we were supposed to go to the detention center, and we went to the interrogator, and over there we had an opportunity to contact our families, and we were taken to be interrogated. The interrogator put in front of us 3 or 4 pages of paper, and without reading them, we were supposed to sign them, to fingerprint it, and they would force us to confess, because the interrogator would say, we have a video from you, you have set fire to the bank, and you have to sign this. That's to say, you would sign something for something you had not done. But it was them who did this, for example, breaking the windows of the banks, destroying public property, setting fire here and there. And of course, doing this themselves, they had to look for people that they could claim to be those people who are the perpetrators. So they had prepared the confessions ahead of time. They made us sign them without having any court session, any fair trial, and we confessed to what we had not done. And then when we were taken to the temporary detention center, that's to say after 48 hours, after 2 days, they gave us some water to drink and some food to eat. And we went to the prosecutor once, and he did not even listen to what we were saying. He just asked a question, what is your name? Why did you come to the street? And once again, they would return us to the detention center in order to make a file for us. And of course, it was a big number of us, and because we were very many, we would talk to each other, and while we were talking, we would find out, for example, somebody's charge was fighting against God, whereas he said that he had not done anything. He was only setting fire to a banner of the leader Khamenei. And very quickly they would charge you, and the charge was fighting against God. And that's to say that an accusation would be very quickly converted into a charge, and this person that they had accused of this, of fighting against God, he was executed after 3 months. Of course, I know the name, but I cannot say it here. I don't want to name him. And after a week, I was released on bail. And they intimidated me very much, and they said that next year, if you appear here, you will definitely be executed. They said that to everybody, and they said if we see you again without even trial, we are going to execute you. All of these things in order to instill fear in you.
As well? If so, explain the details of that for the tribunal.
شکنجه
from the very first hour that we were on the street, they started torturing us because they were beating you up. Anybody that they arrested, they would beat up on the street. And if somebody was wounded, they would not allow anybody to receive medical care. And that's one thing. And the second thing that happened to me personally was that on the street where I was, they beat me up until that's to say the time that I was arrested, and that was my torture, and I was wearing a bomber, and I covered my head with it, and when we were in the vehicle, I couldn't see anybody, I could just hear them, and they were just beating people up until the point that when we reached the information services of the police force, they would beat you, they would hit you in your eyes, anywhere on your body, and over there they would take you 3 by 3, and they would put you in one place. And this is by itself is a torture, because in a very small space, 1 by 1 meter, they would put 3 or 4 people who had to stand for 30 or 40 minutes because there was no space to sit. And after that, they would be taken to the Ministry of Intelligence. It is known as the Blue Building. It is a very horrifying place. And over there in the cold, we had to wait for a few hours, naked, in the big yard that they had. And with any kind of tool that they had, they would try to harm you. And the harm was usually inflicted below the waist, on your legs, on your back. And they would try to beat you or to harm you in such a way that there would be no bruises. They would, for example, punch you in your face, in your head. And therefore, the torture that they inflicted was different for us who had been arrested very early on. They knew how to torture who. That's to say, those that they executed afterwards, the tortures on them were much more severe.
Thank you very much. The tribunal will now ask questions for you.
خواهش می‌کنم.
Mr. Witness.
آقای شاهد، من 2 سوال دارم. عذرخواهی میکنم اگر این رو قبلا گفته باشید و من نشنیده باشم.
Sorry, we're not getting the English translation. Mr. Witness, I just wanted to ask about the trial, if it can be called a trial. You're forced to sign a confession, is that right?
بله.
But then what happens in relation to
بله.
the sentence you received? Who gave you the sentence, and what was the hearing in which that happened? What happened during that hearing?
"48 hours after my arrest, and the arrest of those with me, we were taken to the prosecutor 1 by 1. After that, the prosecutor put certain papers before us. The prosecutor asked us to sign the papers if we wanted to be released. They said if we wanted to be released, we should sign them. There were 3 or 4 pages. I tried to read them, and he said, "What are you reading? Just sign it. We don't have time." So we all signed the papers quickly. There were some confessions that they took from us, that we had disrupt public order, that we had cooperated with the thugs, and we regret what we have done, and similar things. There were a number of confessions that was prepared in advance, and we were just confirming them and endorsing them. And after that, We were sent to the prosecutor again, breaking up a lot. And the following day, there seems to be a technical problem. آقای شاهد.
Sorry, wait a second. There's some.
حدوداً چند دقیقه به 10 دقیقه هم بله.
Yes, please.
Could you repeat your last answer, please? There was a problem with the line. We didn't receive all of it. So could you repeat it all again, please?
Of course. In response, I should say,
Mr. Witness, can you hear me?
بله.
yes, I do.
Could you repeat your last answer, please? We lost you completely. Would you like me to repeat the question, or can you remember what I asked you?
بله. بله.
I will repeat my answer. After I was arrested, after 48 hours of torture, we were taken to the prosecutor. The prosecutor put a few pages before us, which comprised of a number of confessions. We were not even allowed to read what we were signing. After that, we were returned to the prison detention center, and we were waiting for our turn for the hearing. After we went to the hearing, the only thing that we were asked was our name, our national code number, and we were asked why we went to the street. And the judge was not even ready to listen our response. He just told us, be quiet. We didn't have any lawyer, even appointed lawyers. After 10 minutes of hearing, we were returned to the detention center. After the detention center, in which we stayed for 48 hours, we were waiting for our sentence. And the verdict by the court was, there was a warrant. We needed to pay something to be free on bail. We prepared the amount. It took a long time, of course, to prepare the money, about a week time, and therefore we were in prison during that time, and they they identified us and filled out forms on our identification and all that during that 1 week.
At which point did you receive the sentence? Did you have to go back to court?
صدای من رو دارید؟
Can you hear me now?
No. I asked. My last question was, did you have to go? Did you have to go back to court to receive your sentence?
نه.
No. When we were released on bail, after a few months, we received our sentence, our verdict. The verdict included prison sentence and also some cash fine. We only paid the cash fine because we were a large number of people and they did not ask us to go back to prison. The cash fine, of course, was a hefty amount of money.
Just and one last question.
خواهش میکنم.
You
بله.
spoke about a man, and we know his name because we can see it in the statement, and so there's no need for you
Vale.
to repeat it. But the man who was executed, and he was executed,
Vale.
as you've explained, because, or this was your understanding,
Vale.
was that he'd set Khomeini's banner on fire, correct?
دقیقاً چون
Exactly. Khamenei's banner and Iran's flag are at the same level. Burning them is in fact the fight against God. And fighting against God as a charge, according to the law, will be sentenced by execution. And the execution took place very quickly, 3 months after the events. The individual was executed. There were a large number of executions carried out. This was just one of them.
And how and the large number of executions, how do you know that?
به هر حال خب یه سری
Well, we've heard of some of them, and some of them have been broadcast by media. But what I am formally aware of is the execution of this individual who I personally witnessed and was with me.
Thank you, Mr. Witness.
Right.
Justice Yakub?
Good evening to you. Did you know what the reason, well, let me put it this way. What, in your view, were the reasons for the protest in July? In November, sorry.
اعتقاد خب مشخص بود.
Well, it was clear. People were objecting, protesting against the increase of the prices of petrol by 200%. In 72 hours after the internet was shut down, there was a complete news shutdown, and the people were massacred. So we were not aware of all these incidents until we were released, and after the internet was connected again, we became aware of what had happened. Well, the only reason was that the people were protesting against certain issues, peaceful protests, and the system, the establishment, led it into violence in order to be able to suppress it.
I am interested in what you were aware of before you were arrested. You were arrested on Sunday, right? If you remember correctly, the announcement about the fuel increase was made on a Friday. Is that right?
بله.
Yes.
And the protest started on Saturday, right?
بله.
Yes.
And you were arrested on Sunday evening, right?
دقیقاً.
Exactly.
So the protests had gone on for almost 2 days by the time you were arrested, right?
دقیقاً.
Exactly. The protests started and the majority of the people were arrested on Saturday and Sunday in a news shutdown. We knew that it is going to become widespread, but we didn't think that it will even spread to smaller townships and villages. The protests from the capital city Tehran and the southern cities started, and after the internet was cut and we could receive the information, it took 1 or 2 days for us to coordinate and to go out into the streets and to decide what to do. And that is why I think it took, and the protests continued for 3 or 4 days, as I believe, and they suppressed the protests heavily each day after the other. Of course, this was at the time of the news shutdown.
Now, who is the us who took 2 days to coordinate?
Every movement will have a number of individuals leading it in every province. So some of our friends that we had in the city who told us that, for example, there has been some unrest here and there, and the protests have extended to our city, so you come and join us. And since there was no internet, we had to just wait for the telephone calls and all that, for example, the protests have reached this point, so let's go and join them. So this is how it happened. And this is why after 2 or 3 days, we were able to go to the streets in order to protest.
Heard of the increase in the oil price on Friday, right?
Yes.
What did you think when you heard of the increase in the price, oil price?
When the prices of petrol increased, we heard of it on Friday. Everybody heard of it on Friday, of course. On Saturday, what happened was that we were trying to see what is going on and what is going to happen. Well, we had no role in the start of the protests. They had stopped the internet. They had cut the internet. We could hear from various media that there have been some protests. But when the unrest would reach your area and you would understand that the protests have started because of the petrol price increase, and there are some other demands by the protesters, such as the change of the regime or whatever other demand, it took time.
To tell you where I come from so that you understand me. In my day, years ago in South Africa, when we protested against the regime, one of the things we did, for example, is when rent went up, we got all the people together on the basis that the rent was going up. And we told the people the rent was going up because the government was bad, and that was the truth. So the rent went up was an important thing. But the more important thing for us at that time...
Justice Jacob, I think we might have lost the witness.
Okay.
I think he's back.
All right. So the rent was a very important thing for us, but the fact that the government was bad was a worse thing because one needed to change the bad government. Now, I just want to know, was it the increase in the petrol price in itself just like that? Or were there other things too? Oh, it's gone. I think it's about 3 hours later. Yeah, in Iran, just check the time in Iran.
There is 3.5 hours time difference.
3.5. Okay. So it must be quite late there. So, yeah. No, we can talk about that. No, yeah.
Hello? Hello?
Can you hear me, Mr. Witness?
بله.
Can you hear me?
بله بله.
Yes, I can.
بله.
Okay. So
ادامه صحبت رو
We can have a voice conversation without a picture, if that's all right. Or do you want me to come back on? Do you want to have my image as well? Which one?
voice conversation is absolutely fine. I don't know about you guys.
بله.
All right. Now let's hope it's a bit better. Gone.
We may be forced, sir, to move to the next witness until we sort out the technical problems.
من صداتون رو کاملا دارم.
I can hear you clearly now.
الو. الو.
Can you hear me?
من صداتون رو دارم.
I do hear you, says the witness.
Asking you, I gave you a long story, and then I asked whether the petrol price was the only thing, or like in our country in those days, the real thing was that the government was no good.
The rise in the price of petrol was a pretext in order to change the governing regime, which has taken a lot of our freedoms from us during the 40 years that they have been in power. And it is like the situation that you had in South Africa. We made a pretext of this increase in the price of petrol. Although I have to say that it was a problem. Not everybody will have been able to pay the raised price or not. I don't know whether you can hear me or not.
I can hear you well, but I was going to disagree with the use of the word pretext, because pretext is the wrong word. The problem was a real problem, and you wanted the real problem solved that exists now, but you wanted you didn't want only to take out the leaves and put fresh leaves on top. You wanted to have a better root. Otherwise, all the leaves will get corrupted. Is that more or less the idea?
دقیقا.
Precisely as you're saying, yes.
Now, so was it known to them, because these people have spies everywhere? Oh.
I think it's cut off.
The number you have called is